What is up, everybody? Welcome back, Nerding Out Sports. It's Rob and Donald, and the Giants have a new general manager. It is Joe Schoen. We finally got his name right this time. We know how to say it. Joe Schoen, former assistant GM of the Buffalo Bills, is now with us, and it's a step in the right direction for sure. It is a new day in Giants land. Donald, go ahead, take it away.
Really excited. To be honest, he was the number one on the Giants list for a while. I was listening to Talking Giants. Justin Panic was saying that he heard that the Giants actually reached out to him towards the end of the season as a replacement to Gettleman. They kind of picked him out as their first choice. I think it was pretty obvious when he was the very first interviewee that he was their first choice. Um, he was the hot name on the board. NFL circles absolutely love the work he's been doing. He's really well respected around the NFL. He already interviewed with the Bears. He's a very exciting hire for the Giants. Just look at some of the quotes here. So Jordan Rannon, he was saying that from what he's hearing from around people around the league, he's really smart. Dude's gonna outwork you. He's straightforward, great communicator. He's well-rounded. Home run hire is what people are saying around the league. Brandon Beane, who he worked under at Buffalo, took time out of his day yesterday and had a Zoom call with New York beat reporters, and he said that he was his right-hand man, and that he's going to bring in an inclusive process where he's going to be a really great communicator, and everyone's going to be kind of working as a team around him. It's going to be a collaborative process. So that's the kind of guys that we've been needing. And the thing I like about him is he's well-rounded. He's a very well-rounded guy. He's earned his keep. He started off as an intern in Carolina in 2000 as a ticket guy, which is a story for all guys who are starting from the bottom. Never give up, right? So he worked as an intern, and then he climbed the ladder in Carolina, and then he went to Miami and worked as the director of player personnel under Bill Parcells. He previously worked with Brandon Beane in Carolina, and he climbed up to the ranking. He was area scout. He was involved in scouting all over. Then obviously he then was the director of player personnel in Miami, so that he is now involved in pro personnel, not just scouting in the draft process. So it's really good too. So he's well rounded at this point. And then he went up and followed Brandon Beane to Buffalo, and this is where he's really developed as an excellent candidate. So it's very exciting. What are your thoughts, my man?
No, I'm excited too. It's this is the he was in the top of my list. We talked about it last episode who I would prefer, and I said, well, Joe Schoen, we called him Schoen at the time, but Joe Schoen would have been the top of my list there. I just think that you need to get a guy from a winning organization, and everyone we interviewed and everyone that was in the finalist list was coming from a winning organization. We had Buffalo, San Francisco, and Kansas City. All guys from that organization were on our finalist list, and you really couldn't go wrong with either one of those three. But I think we got it right. I would have been fine with either one. Joe Schoen is certainly a guy that I feel like is ready for the role, and we just needed a change of scenery. We needed to go elsewhere to get our GM, and that's what we did. And I like that he came in. His first quote wasn't like pumping his chest or anything. Like, Gettleman was kind of like, look at my track record, and things speak for itself, and you kind of like get a bad feeling from day one. But Joe Schoen came out and just said the work begins. The immediate focus to hire a head coach, who I will work in lock and step with to create a collaborative environment for our football operations. I mean, right there, that's what you want to hear. Just be upfront with us. Tell us what you're trying to do, what the goal is, and that's exactly what he did. And most importantly, win football games. That's how his quote ended. Our goal is to build a roster that will be competitive, have depth, and most importantly, win football games, which we didn't do a lot of in the last regime. So let's just hope that things are different this time. I think they will be. I think they understand that they have to rebuild it here. They can't go into next year and be like, let's try to build a winner. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that Joe Schoen and hopefully a whole new staff around him is going to be the right people to get it done. So
Well, my
now
question to you, man, my question to you is, what made him your first choice?
I like that he was with Bean in Buffalo, because if you look at what they did specifically after drafting Josh Allen, they became a consistent team every single year. They were like what we were in the early years with Coughlin, 05, 06, 07, 08. We were just always there, even if we weren't winning, every single. We won in 07, obviously, but we were always competitive, and we were always a team that you had to look for in the playoff race. So the Giants are a team to watch. The Giants are a team to watch, and we were in those years. And Buffalo has been that team the last 4-5 years or so. They've always been around. Even when Brady was still in the AFC East, Buffalo was still fighting every single year, and that's something that we haven't gotten, in the last decade. Is a team that really just fights. And I want to be able to see a team that's going to build the right way. Build it the right way, because Buffalo was built well. They got their quarterback. They didn't have to use every single pick on the offensive line, yet there they are being a successful offense. They made correct moves. They brought in a guy like Stephon Diggs. They have a solid defense, and here they are about to play another playoff game. So they're in a position that we would dream to be in right now, because we want the Giants to be a playoff team. So I just wanted somebody from a winning organization. So it was really Shane and Poles for me that were the two, because you really can't go any better than that, especially from the AFC side of things. You got the Chiefs, who have been the elite of the AFC, and then you have Buffalo, who's been really, really good almost every single year for the last 4 or 5 years now. So I'm excited about it. I think Shane's the right guy for the job, and I wanted a first time guy, a former assistant, whatever position that may have been, and that's basically everybody that we interviewed. Someone that was below a really good GM, and now it's time for him to get his own role and create his own vision, and hopefully we see it come to life. And I'm very, very excited. I'm glad we got him.
Yeah, I think what put him top for me was Josh Allen, because he was not the slam dunk quarterback coming out of that draft. It required scouting. Remember, the Giants scouted him heavily, and from what I seem to recall, Shermer said he thought he had a chance of being a starter in this league. I remember he quoted, and then he said that after Josh Allen totally tore the Giants apart in a Buffalo Giant game. And he said, "Oh yeah, well we liked Allen. We just thought he had a chance of being a chance." Well, the Giants messed up their quarterback selection, Daniel Jones. Let's face it. So what they did in selecting Josh Allen was a home run for them, because it all starts with a quarterback. I mean, what set him apart above, say, Adam Peters, who was also, I think for I here, he was a very close second in the GM search, was the fact that he found a quarterback. And he was very heavily involved in the Josh Allen process. So, and they've developed him. And then you go and make that trade for Stephon Diggs, was another home run trade. So he's been involved in all that, because he's involved in not just draft scouting, but he's pro personnel as well. So he's pretty much involved in all kinds of aspects. Another thing that sets him apart was the fact that he and Brandon Beane rebuilt the Bills. In 2017, Buffalo were in a very similar state as to where we are now. The New York Giants, as of 2021, 2022, is in exactly the same state as where Buffalo were in 2017. The Giants, at the moment, we all know about the nepotism that's going on in ownership in the front office. They've got scouts that are way too old or way too past it, and they're all kind of still in the Dave Gettleman mindset, or picked up by Dave Gettleman, and then there's guys that are sniping behind the scenes that didn't like the way that Dave Gettleman treated them, rightfully so. how Dave Gettleman was the antithesis to every good modern general manager. He treated people badly. He treated people with disrespect. He was arrogant. He was very much pompous, and he didn't believe in analytics. He joked about it. He mocked about it, and that is not how you deal with things. The way that he handled drafts was not collaborative. So that's why collaborative is very important. He didn't handle drafts collaboratively. He had his guy, Daniel Jones, and that was it. Everybody else can go take a walk. Same with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is my guy. He's a gold jacket guy. He's touched by the hand of God. You guys can all take a walk. I'm not listening to any calls. Nobody's going to call me. He's my guy, right? Now, maybe that might have worked back in the day. Maybe. But now you got to listen to people. People you listen to respected professionals all around you. It's a collaborative process, and Dave Gettleman also kind of protected his job and kind of threw Pat Shermer under the bus in order to get him fired to keep his job. So Dave Gettleman was not a good guy. He was a terrible general manager. So what this sets him apart? I don't know if you agree with this, but what sets him apart, Shane, is that he's collaborative. He's going to listen to everybody. Their draft board. He's already said his draft board is going to be someone where he's never going to do anything just on his own volition. There's going to be full input from all scouts and all people around him. That's how you want things. He's going to work right. His right-hand man will be his head coach. I think a collaborative process is very important, and I think people will be well respected and treated well within the building, which is really good. He's also, because I said that he rebuilt the draft process and the scouting process in Buffalo, he'll probably do the same thing here, and that's really important. We need to get some modern minds in here, and analytics is very important in the modern NFL, and so you want a modern aspect, and that's what this organization's been missing, man. It's been stuck in the dark ages. It's been stuck in the 90s. It's been stuck in the early thousands. What would you say to those things I was saying, Lynn? Would you agree with that, or?
No, I agree completely. Gettleman was very stuck in his own ways. He wanted to keep it old school, and that's why I think that Judge was actually a perfect hire for Gettleman, because Joe Judge was in that same smack you in the mouth, run the football type of mentality that doesn't win you football games, really. I mean, you can still run the ball. Don't get me wrong. Running the ball is still obviously a huge key. Buffalo does it very well also. Yeah. But we saw that whatever the hell their philosophy was over the last 2 years did not work. So a whole new process is needed, absolutely top to bottom. And hopefully this means that, John Mara stays out of things, and Steve Tisch as well. They got their guy that they wanted to be a GM, and hopefully they say, okay, this is your show. Everybody that you hire to be your scouts and personnel and all that, this is your guys' show. And they're just going to stay out of it because they were too involved. They were too involved with the process beforehand, even though they never really came out and said anything specifically, to give us that reason to believe they were in the process. You knew that John Mara and all of his cronies around him were heavily involved in what the Giants did, because they wouldn't have hired Gettleman if they weren't. They hired Gettleman specifically because he was going to keep Eli Manning around. And it was past Eli's prime. And, you had to move on at that point. As much as we loved the guy, it was time. There you go. It was time to move on. And they didn't move on. And they kept trying to win with an aging, declining quarterback. And it was just a whole mess. And now they're finally doing something different, going out of the organization, not hiring from within. And it's a breath of fresh air, because I was very, very scared they were going to stick with what we had and just kind of, go with Judge and Abrams next year and be like, okay, let's see what you can do. But it was clear as day a change was needed, and I'm very happy they're doing that. And now the real question becomes, who's the head coach? Because once you have a head coach, then the process begins. Now you can really start. Now you can build offensive coordinator. You get the offensive coordinator. You get your line coach. You see who's going to stick around from this staff, if anybody, what they're going to do maybe with Patrick Graham. Where does he go? So a lot of questions have to be answered still. But once we get that head coach, we're going to start to see all those other dominoes fall into place. And they did interview Brian Dable last night, very quickly after the announcement of Joe Schoen being hired. They were on a video call with Dable. That's apparently his number one choice, but there has been dialogue already between Joe Schoen and Brian Flores, and the Giants are also about to interview him. So it looks like we have our choices narrowed down to 2 or 3. Dan Quinn is also in that category. I would stay away from the Cowboys coaching staff because the last time we brought in a Cowboys coach didn't work out too well. But I think that Dable's been my choice, from the start. I was on the Joe Schoen Dable train for a while, and but I also said I would be fine with Brian Flores. So, I mean, they can't get it wrong here if it's one of those two guys, and I'm just waiting for the announcement at this point. Want the interview with Flores to go through, but I think we have our top 2 choices, and now it's just about who they hire, Dable or Flores.
Yeah, they're also going to interview Leslie Frazier, the Bills defensive coordinator. That's another guy that they're going to interview. But I think it kind of tells the whole story. Who do they interview first? Dable. I'm pretty sure that as soon as he was hired, they interviewed Dable, which kind of says to me that I think the Giants want to go in that direction. I think Dable's probably their first choice. But I know that the Giants love Flores, and Flores has the Giants as number 1 on his list too. He's a New York guy, Brooklyn guy. He would love to be home, and I would love for him to come home. I'm a big Brian Flores fan. I think he'd be a fantastic coach for the New York Football Giants. But Dable has the automatic connection with Schoen. Schoen wants somebody as right-hand guy, and Dable's done a tremendous job as offensive coordinator for the Bills. A very good coach. Bunch of teams like him. Bunch of teams are interested in him. So he'd be a really good hire. I don't think Frazier is going to be a serious candidate. And then we get to Dan Quinn. I'm not as low on him as maybe others are. I mean, he's still got a pretty decent resume. I know that it didn't work out for him towards the end of his time in Atlanta. So, yeah, Dan Quinn, he did get Atlanta to the Super Bowl, but it didn't work out for him. But obviously there was a meltdown in the Super Bowl, which probably doesn't reflect too well on him. But he also rebuilt the Dallas Cowboys defense. I mean, Dallas defense the year prior was all-time bad, one of the worst defenses in football, and he made them like the second best defense in football. So he's a good coach. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he should be the head coach option, but it's not someone to dismiss. To be honest, I don't think there's anybody that I would automatically dismiss. Whoever Schoen wants as his guy, then I'm totally behind. That's what this is the first process that I can think of where there wasn't really a candidate on both GM or head coach where I'm like, no, this can't happen. None of that. That's what I've liked about this is like our final 3 candidates in the general manager search was the Chiefs guy, who you liked, and Peters of San Francisco, and Schoen. And Peters, he ran Schoen a close second from what Ian O'Connor was saying. He made a really compelling case in his second interview. The Giants were really blown away by Adam Peters' interview. So he's someone to watch out for down the line. I think a bunch of teams will eventually hire him very soon to be the general manager, maybe even this year. And I think he's going to be a very, very good candidate. But the Giants guy all the way was Schoen. It was pretty much set in stone, I really believe, from the start of the process. So whoever we choose, I'm behind. But I think our 2 is going to be either Dable or Flores. Who would you prefer the 2? Dable?
I'm gonna go in Dable direction just because I want an offensive head coach. We need an offensive mind, and I like Flores a lot, but we saw how brutal our offense has been the last 2 years. Specifically, the last 2 years, it's been bad for a while, but the last 2 years it's been historically bad, and we need an offensive mind in here. I think Flores will thrive wherever he goes. and if it's here, I'll be fine with it. If they get him a really good offensive coordinator, then that's fine. But I think if you want to get a first-time head coach and go with an offensive mind, then Dable is probably the best of the best out there to give that job to. And plus, we talked about it last episode that Joe Schoen has the connection with Dable, and you like to think that the two of them have talked about this already.
Mhm.
If we team up somewhere, I'm GM, you're head coach, we can build our own thing. And I'm sure that's certainly been in conversation. And it kind of confirms that when they interviewed him within hours of hiring Joe Schoen, he was the first guy. So I feel like he's their top choice. And Flores is probably that second guy, which is fine. You really can't go wrong there. And that's what you said earlier. You can't go wrong. You couldn't go wrong with the GM choice. And you really can't go wrong if your two head coaching candidates or three are Dable, Flores, and Quinn, and whoever else could be on that list. So I'm for the Dable hiring because it's been my choice for a while. I'm excited though. If we get it done, I'm kind of just looking down at my phone every 2 seconds to see if the notification pops up. But
I think it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
To follow your point there, bro, the great Super Bowl champion Chris Kenny, he tweeted here, not going to lie, would love to see Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator under head coach Brian Dable. Hope Joe Schoen can make it happen, because Wink Martindale left as defensive coordinator of the Ravens mutually with Harbaugh. Surprise decision, considering Wink Martindale has been, last year he was certainly a very hot candidate as a potential head coach, and he ran one of the best defenses in football. Baltimore lost a bunch of guys due to injury, and it affected Baltimore's year. I don't think it had anything to do with Martindale, but he's left his role. I'm a little bit surprised by that, but there's a very good defensive coordinator now sitting there. So if you wanted to go the offensive route and bring in Dable as head coach, you could bring in like a Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator. And you've got two legitimate coaches on either side, which is a very serious option. So what do you think of Chris Kenny's suggestion?
I think it's a home run suggestion. If they can make it happen, then go for it. I think Martindale might want to try for a head coaching job at this point. Maybe that's why he left, because it's clear Baltimore's not going they're not moving on from Harbaugh anytime soon. So maybe that's it. Maybe he wanted to search for other options at the head coaching position. But if you can give him kind of that Patrick Graham role where he's like the assistant head coach to Dable, then I think that'd be a perfect scenario. Then it would tell me that the Giants are going all in on changing things around here, because then it would actually confirm that John Mara is sick of it. That he's finally sick of it after all this time, and the fans are starting to get into his head. If we make a move like that, the fact that we've already hired the GM that we all wanted, if we get the head coach that most of us want, and if we get a guy like Martindale as defensive coordinator, then you're pretty much confirming that the fans have some power here, and that we're kind of bullying John Mara into making these moves.
Yeah, I think it's worked. Whatever the Giants' social media has done, and whatever has happened, I think a lot of this to do is the season tickets. I don't think people were renewing their season tickets, bro. I think considering there was 20% attendance, if that, at MetLife in the last game of the year, and people were wearing bags over their heads, I think that told the whole story that was untenable. And I'm pretty sure that if they kept the same thing running, that they would have lost a bunch on PSLs, etc. So I think that's why they made that choice. And good, because it all comes down to business at the end of the day. So this is the best for the business, best for the operation, best for the organization, and the Giants front office and the Giants ownership, they have to rebuild their credibility. They have to rebuild their credibility with the fan base. They have to rebuild their credibility around the league, and rebuild their credibility in the media, because at the moment people are laughing at them. Their own fans are laughing at them. The media is definitely laughing at them. And the league is laughing at them. And considering the Giants, especially John Mara, hold the Giants as one of the founding fathers of the NFL, which they are. There's only amongst maybe 3 teams in the NFL which you could maybe legitimately say are the founding fathers of the NFL. We're one of them. So we should be a lot better than we are. So it's time that we start acting like it. So this is the first step in that direction. Circle back to what you were saying about the head coach. I think that would be a home run situation. But my first choice would probably be Flores, on the basis that I think that because when you're a head coach, you don't really have that much time just to focus on one side of the ball. When you're a head coach, you're pretty much the CEO, if you like to say. You know what I mean? Like they have to basically dabble in everything, and you kind of need experience to really understand that role. Do you know what I mean? I think that's where the Giants struggled with Pat Shurmur, Ben McAdoo, dudes that have an offense, and they were focused on play calling, but they weren't able to focus on the things that were going all around them because they were so focused on their area of expertise. And they didn't have a great coaching setup around them. And that was on them, and that's on Mara and the organization to hire the right coaches. But that's what happened, and I think that they kind of missed what was going on around them. So you do need a CEO type where they're able to take a step back and let their other coaches coach as well. That's why the Giants chose Joe Judge originally, but he was just too inexperienced. He wasn't right coach for the job. But Flores has experience. He's a winning coach over the last 2 years for Miami. That's not something to forget. And he did it with a pretty poor quarterback situation, which is also pretty creditable. And he's beaten up on Belichick, which is also almost impossible to do. You know what I mean? So I think that means that he's a heck of a coach. And when I saw that he left Miami, he was the first name that came to my head. I was like, if we keep Joe Judge and Flores has been fired, there's something seriously wrong with this league. So we've now got ourselves an opportunity where we could hire him, and I would love that. So he'd be my first choice, but Dable, 1A and 1B, as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy either way. I think what we should do is our next podcast, we should go through our head coaching options and which ones we really like, maybe in the next couple of days for our listeners. But we'll focus right now on Joe Schoen. He's obviously the first call of business is to bring in a head coach in which he can work with. What's the most important thing that Joe Schoen needs to do to bring credibility back to the organization, Rob?
I think he just needs to make us, a fighting organization again, because we're a laughing stock, like you said. We were getting laughed at by every single media outlet. Wendy's was making jokes about us. It was brutal. People were coming into the stadium with Pepsi cans attached to their paper bags, and it's something that we haven't seen from our team ever, really, at least in my lifetime. And as bad as things have been at times, this was a brutal year. And I think the draft process is important. He needs to clear up some of this cap space. John Mara has already said that he'd be willing to eat some money to fix the cap situation, so that's a good sign. We saw Philly have to do it last year, and they made the playoffs. So I think, that's the only way you're going to free up some cap and be able to make some moves is if you eat some money, and they're going to have to do that. We do have some players that they can cut. That's another conversation. But just fix the mess that Gettleman left, and it's not going to be a 1-year thing. It may not even be a 2-year process. It could take 2-3 years maybe to kind of clean things up. And Gettleman came in, he tried to clean up Reese's mess in 1 year. So he was getting rid of guys and signing others, and he was trading players, and he was doing all these different things to try to create a new situation and he got rid of pretty much every single player from Jerry Reese's regime and made his own squad, except for like 2 players. Everyone else was a Dave Gettleman guy. Mm-hmm. I think Joe Schoen has to evaluate the roster top to bottom, and it doesn't matter if the previous GM drafted or signed them. If they're good enough and we feel like he can give our team a chance to win, we're gonna play that guy. We're gonna use that guy. They really have it's really just evaluating the roster, figuring out who stays, who goes, and top priority is just rebuilding that line, because it doesn't matter who you put at quarterback if you can't put a good enough, decent enough offensive line in front of him. It's going to be difficult. I'm not saying you have to use all of your draft picks on offensive linemen. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you have to at least build the foundation and fix that line at some point and make that a priority. Fix that offensive line, and then the rest of the offense should flow a lot more easily. I guess that'd be it. But just in total, bring us back to some relevancy. Even if it's just a rebuilding year, we know we're probably going to lose again next year. But if we're not laying over and just laying down and dropping kneel downs inside our own 5-yard line, then I'm okay with a losing year if it means that the future is bright, and the future just was not bright. There was no light at the end of the tunnel with the last regime. I can see it if this new GM, new head coach, and all these new personnel have a vision and they have a plan in place. I just never got that sense with Judge and Gettleman. I never sensed that there was a mutual plan. That's what I want. And that's the big thing, is he's going to bring in his own guy that they have a plan together and they're going to execute together, and all the scouts are going to work as a unit. That's what we need. We didn't have that before. So that's what I think is most important with Joe Schoen, is collaborative effort, like you mentioned at the start of this whole thing. That's what we need. A whole organization working as one to create this winning, bring back what we once knew as Giants fans, which was relevancy.
Yeah. Two key things for me. First of all, latter part of the drafts. For the last few years, or latter parts of our drafts have been a mess. In fact, not just the last few years, for basically the last 10 years. The latter part of our draft has been a mess. Remember the time where we selected Ahmad Bradshaw in the 7th round, and he ended up winning us the Super Bowl as one of our star running backs. You can find running backs in the 7th round, man. You can find running backs just off of waivers. You can find them anywhere. So we didn't need to pick Saquon Barkley 2nd overall. You can find running backs, but it's not really about running backs. It's about, you can find talent deep in the draft if you look hard enough, and we've not done a good enough job of that. That's where really good teams rebuild. That's credit to San Francisco. I think that's why Adam Peters is really hot candidate. He found Warner. He found Kittle. You find these guys later in the draft, and they can be stars. The Chiefs got a 6th round guard, and he was one of the better guards in the NFL this year. You find talent later in the draft. Giants have done a terrible job scouting. It all comes down to scouting and drafting. That's what it all comes down to. That's the only way you can rebuild this thing. You're not going to rebuild this thing through free agency. And that's where Dave Gettleman and Jerry Reese have failed, because they thought that they could rebuild through free agency. They mistakenly thought they were really close to being a contender, so they just spent recklessly in free agency. Jerry Reese did it and set us back years. Dave Gettleman did it, and he basically napalmed the franchise. So the thing is, he didn't bring in bad players, Dave Gettleman. The players that he signed in free agency were not bad. Majority of them. I liked Blake Martinez. He was very good. Kenny Golladay, everybody was excited about him. Adoree Jackson actually was our best corner last year. He did not sign bad players. I think all of us respect Logan Ryan. He's a decent player. I don't think we should have re-signed him to such a hefty contract. That was a mistake. But originally signing him was not a mistake. He was a good player. We signed good players, but the thing was, they misjudged where we were. The Giants weren't close to contending. That was a mistake. They were never close to it. The only reason why we were so close to a playoff spot was because it was an all-time bad NFC least that year, where we were 6-10 and still had a chance. That's embarrassing for the division, So the Giants weren't that close, So they probably should have been smarter. They probably shouldn't have signed Galladay and drafted Tony and then signed Adoree Jackson. You probably need to choose one of the wide receivers and then focus on the corner. I think would have saved some, it would have been much better planning. in that respect because, Tony, I don't think he had a system. I think he's more of a guy that would suit a West Coast system or a Chiefs or a San Francisco, one of those guys where you can throw a slant to him, you can take it to the house. The Giants never had a system like that. They were a very meat and potatoes offensive system, so I never understood that. And Kenny Golladay, he was a guy there. You need a quarterback that has a nice feel for his passes where he can throw kind of lob passes and he can go up and get them. And Daniel Jones is not really that type of guy. And we never really had any quarterback that could do that. So, again, they weren't really thinking about a system. So before I go off on a tangent, just to shorten it up, basically what the Giants need to do is they need to have a system and need to draft around that system and make a plan. And they also need to draft well later in the draft. They need to hit some home run picks later in the draft. And you do that and you find your quarterback, this thing could be rebuilt in 2 years. Just look at the Bengals. The Bungles, I used to call them the Bungles for about 20 years. Bring in Joe Burrow, and now they're playing tonight to have a chance to go to a conference finals, which is unbelievable. So they're a really good team. So you find the quarterback, then all this goes away. Just like what the Bills did. Go get Josh Allen. They're back-to-back AFC champions. So AFC conference champions. So in their division. So get your quarterback. So those are the three: draft well, get your quarterback, and have a system. Do you agree with all that?
Yeah, it's all very important. The system that's the most important thing. There is we were just signing players just to fill the roster. It's like we were playing Madden with the salary cap off. You know, they were just bringing in players left and right. It's like, oh, we can make this work, and we'll worry about it next year. And that's really what they were doing. Yeah, it was certainly I like the moves. Don't get me wrong. I like Golladay. I like Jackson. I like Logan Ryan. But when you look at it in a wider scope, you're like, they better win because you're going to put us in a really tough position next year when we're picking high, but also have no cap space to make any sort of moves. Now the cap is easily manipulated. I'm not worried about it. They can make 3 moves and all of a sudden they got like $15 million in cap space. So I'm not really worried about it right now. But certainly the last regime just did things. They just kind of just threw darts at the board and said, okay, let's sign this guy, and that's really what it looked like. We need depth, really. That's what you said. The later rounds of the draft are so important to build your depth, and we could have easily had a competent offensive line from the last draft alone. We had a chance to draft a good tackle at 20. We took Tony. I'm fine with the Kadarius Toney, but we had a chance to get Trey Smith. Everybody did, as he was picked as late as he was. It's things like that, like you said, that you really need to have good scouting, good drafting, and that's how you rebuild this thing. And getting the quarterback, of course, that's another conversation. Is what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. Certainly is a conversation for another day. However, let us know what you think about the hiring of Joe Schoen in the comments, and who do you want as the head coach? Flores, Dable, Quinn, anybody else that we didn't talk about? But let us know. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff. And listen to us on the Sportswire Radio Network. Very excited about that. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And
thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Sir, we will see you all next time. Let's go Giants. Peace out.
Things are looking up, my man.
Sir.